Hey guys, it has been a crazy couple of years, hasn't it? We've been through this whole thing for a very, very long time. I hope everybody can hear me. I've been writing this article for the past 2 days. I've gotten some sleep, which is good. And I also have been invested in John's court case for the last 3.5, almost 4 years. It's just been a whirlwind. So I needed a couple of days to catch my breath once the verdict was in because, everybody needs a little bit of a mental health break, I guess. The good news is I actually ordered the transcripts and eventually I'll be doing like a live read through of those. So I'm opening up my article right now so I can talk to you guys about everything that I observed. I want to put a disclaimer out there. This is my personal account of my experience during John Schaffer's sentencing court date. It should not be confused with John Schaffer's court transcripts, which I will obtain very soon. I've already initiated payment for them. At the outset, I wish to mention that while I endeavored to take detailed notes, the sheer quantity of information was necessitated strategic paraphrasing for clarity. Okay. So on October 25th, my friend and I went to the courthouse. We attended John's sentencing hearing. If you guys are not aware, John Schaffer is the leader and the founder of the band Iced Earth. I took as many notes as I possibly could to gain an understanding of the case beyond the media's portrayal, which, it was just pretty confusing. Things changed consistently with the articles that we were reading. Some of the articles did not match the court documents that I had been reading, which made things even more confusing. Because John was silent for so long, a lot of fans went berserk, became ex fans, trolled the Iced Earth account. They were trolling all over the place. Blabbermouth and Metal Sucks were putting out a lot of hit pieces without giving the full account of events. And I really encourage you guys, there are some public court documents out there. So I really encourage you guys to try to get access to those. You can inbox me on Facebook or Instagram and ask me for those documents because they're publicly available and I'm happy to share them with you. There are links below because I had to put out $277 for John's court transcripts today. I do have some people chipping in, which is a really good thing. The trip was a great expense. I took time off of work and I have actually taken more time off of work for the last couple of days just to write this article and prepare to go live, basically. I wonder who's here. No one's in the chat. Feel free to add stuff to the chat. I can try to answer questions if anybody has any questions. I see there are 5 people here. I have no idea who's here, but I'm happy you're here. All right, so here's the thing. John got incredible news on Friday. He is only going to be sentenced to 36 months probation, 120 hours of community service, and um he had to pay a $1,200 fine. But once I get through all of the facts of the sentencing, you'll understand why everything was the way it was, to be honest with you. So, here I go. So at the courthouse, John seemed pretty, composed and he seemed pretty positive. He was very nice. He came up to David and I and he shook our hands and he was very happy that we were there. I think he was pretty happy it wasn't like a crazy media circus as well. So that was really comforting because I've put so much work into all of this. The fact that he, knew about all of the work that we had put in and the dedication that we had for him meant so very much to me. And I can't express how much gratitude I have to him because without John, I don't think I would have questioned as many things in the media to begin with. And I'm glad that in general always put it out there that we should question the things that we read and we should constantly do our research. So I did my research, and I knew all along that he wasn't guilty of the things that they said he was guilty of. Upon entry of the courtroom, we sat down and we relaxed for a couple of minutes, and then Honorable Judge Amit Mehta entered the courtroom. All individuals, that were in the courtroom, we all got up and we rose. That's pretty much, the standard. Everybody does that. You go to court, you stand up, they go, all rise. Judge Mehta announced the purpose of gathering for the sentence was, gathering was for the sentencing of Mr. John Schaffer, who was accompanied by his legal counsel, Mark Victor, and Andrew C. Markenthal. I think that's how you say it. Marcenthal. I don't know how to say it exactly. I hope I said it right, but they seem like really cool guys. You could check out their Instagrams. I think it's Attorneys for Freedom. I'm gonna verify that right now, actually, because they're pretty funny. They got a really neat Instagram, and they post some interesting and funny things. But they're very serious, and they have all of the direct information about John's sentencing right on their Instagram right now. At Attorneys for Freedom. Go ahead and give them a follow on Instagram, and feel free to thank them for their work that they did for John, because they did an excellent job. Absolutely excellent. So the proceedings started, and there were discussions about the previously agreed upon plea arrangement between John and his attorneys and the United States prosecution team and Judge Mehta. The discussion basically centered around the charges against John. And if you want to review the charges against John, you can pretty much read it in any news article that's out there. What we're going to learn later on is that some of those things were not so. He did not do some of those things. And that's a really important thing to note, because just because you're charged with something, it doesn't mean that you definitely did it, you know? Everybody gets their day in court. Everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And that's a really important thing to remember. They try to jack up the charges as much as they can so they can at least get one conviction out of you. And that's basically how the criminal justice system works. So it's important to note that, when reading a lot of these articles, not everything, is so. If you're charged with something, it might not be exactly, what they're saying you're charged with. Like I said, they try to jack up all of the charges. Following his initial release from jail in April 2021, prosecutors and Schaffer's attorneys agreed to recommend a prison sentence of 3.5 to 4.5 years, contingent upon his cooperation with the government. But it's really important to note that this simply just required him to not evade justice and to avoid being an undue burden on the criminal justice system. That doesn't mean cooperation doesn't mean that you're ratting people out, and a lot of people need to understand that. You're cooperating with the government. You're basically just doing what they ask you to do. And in John's case, that meant, check in and be on probation, get a job, be a normal citizen, don't make problems, don't get arrested again. That's basically what cooperation means. A lot of people misconstrued that, and I think it's really important to note that. Judge Mehta noted that John's attorney submitted 31 letters of recommendation from friends and family, and maybe some of us fans. And I really thank anybody who did help write a letter on John's behalf, because he really needed the support. 31 letters, that's actually a lot of letters for a court hearing. People are lucky if they get 5 or 10 of them. I thank the people who did step up. The people who didn't, it's still okay. Maybe you were too afraid to do it. Maybe you were intimidated because you didn't feel like you personally knew him. Maybe some of you didn't know the facts of the case. In any case, that's okay as well. Thank you very much To those of you who still supported John throughout this, even if you didn't write a letter and even if you stayed silent about it, it's a crazy climate. So, any support is appreciated. So there were a couple of notable figures at John's court date, and those notable figures were Matt Barlow and Freddie Vidalis. They're former bandmates of John's from the band Iced Earth. Most of you know that John is also in a band called Sons of Liberty and another band called Demons and Wizards. A lot of that stuff is on hold right now, but I would never completely rule out any of the projects getting back together. Hansi actually recently came out and said that John deserves a second chance. Google that, just look it up on the internet. You can see exactly what Hansi said because I don't have the quote right in front of me at this moment. John also mentioned in his statement that he would be getting back to music at some point. So let's pray that he does. Wish him the best. Just keep up the support. Keep rallying up the support for him because he really needs it right now. He also had a couple of other friends that came out to support him. One of them was his martial arts instructor, and the other one was his album illustrator. And they gave incredible statements. From what I remember, Matt Barlow presented a statement in court, and he established himself as John's brother-in-law, former bandmate, and current law enforcement officer. He reflected on his time at Iced Earth and how John connected him to the music industry. Matt also discussed his career and transition to law enforcement and how John was extremely supportive to him. He shared his insights on his professional experience with criminals, highlighting the fact that a lot of people who get in trouble actually want to get better. They want to be rehabilitated. He stressed that John was one of those people that deserves a chance to redeem himself and start anew. He proposed that John had like a lot of time to reflect on all of his personal, problems and his personal life. He actually said that John had joined a church and he established a bunch of meaningful friendships over the last couple of years. Now, I believe Matt also noted that John has employed a significant amount of people in the last 35 years, basically as a small business owner. Iced Earth was a small business entity. And it's really important to remember that too. I mean, just because it's a band, it doesn't mean it's all fun and games. I can verify for a fact it's not all fun and games. Matt's statement was incredible. It really was very powerful from what I remember. God bless him for being there. So Freddie Vidalis also came up, and he's also a former member of Iced Earth. He testified and he shared his personal and professional relationship experience with John since 2008. So he's known John since 2008. He praised John's abilities to navigate the music industry, and he admitted he learned a lot from John. He also mentioned that John has an unwavering commitment to family. He actually recounted a specific incident where John actually rerouted a tour bus to accommodate a band member's health emergency. The person's health needs were way more important than the band. He also actually emphasized a time where John supported another band member who needed to step down for a time to care for a sick family member, and that just shows that John is a very loving and caring person. Sure, he had a band and had money to make, but he cared about the families first, and that's a really great thing about him. From what I understand, he actually cares about people and loves the people that he works with. I know a lot of people say that, he's a difficult person to work with, and I've heard people refer to him as an asshole and stuff like that. I never really get that impression. People have to be professional. People have to run their bands like a business. It's not right to assume that people shouldn't run their band like a business. I wasn't there. I've only read articles and I've heard things from, fans that make jokes and stuff like that. And just to be honest with you, I've run a band and running a band isn't easy, and sometimes you have to say things that people don't want to hear, and sometimes you have to, manage things. That's that. There's not much you can do about being a leader. It's like being somebody's boss. Nobody likes the boss, I guess. But, he's just a professional person, a smart person, and people who are creative geniuses running a business entity, can see things from a distance, like way before something even happens. Like they can kind of predict the future. I'll just put it that way. His martial arts instructor, Todd Wright, also presented a statement on John's behalf, underscoring his experience as John's martial arts instructor while addressing the physical challenges that John had faced, including spine issues. His spine issues were mitigated with his instruction, meaning, he was instructing John and he tried to help him with his discipline, and he tried to help him with a lot of different things. And, when you're in a lot of pain, sometimes that can really affect your overall health and well-being. Honestly, most of the time it does. I can attest to that. I have spinal issues. Certain stretches and certain moves help me out. So I can definitely understand why martial arts could help with spinal issues. He also said that John was able to gain, I think I mentioned, like an enhanced sense of discipline, but he also was able to develop emotional control, and martial arts ultimately improved John's health and well-being. And that's a really great thing. Todd also recognized John's passion for history. He mentioned that he asked John about historical outings that he could go out and see with his family and go out and see on his own. He also spoke about how John attempted to educate him about the music recording process, I believe. When we get the court transcripts, I'll be able to like put more of a picture out about what Todd said. Everything was just going by so fast. He also mentioned something really beautiful, that John, comes over and has dinner with him and his family, and that his 5-year-old child really loves John. And he mentioned how gentle and kind John was with his 5-year-old. And I have to admit that really touched my heart. Because when you see like, you know, metalheads like John, you don't really think of them as being, a guy that would be gentle and kind with kids. But then again, you know what? John has a daughter, and I'm sure that he loved that little girl, and that, having a child like softened his heart. I mean, this is my opinion again. I don't know. I don't know how everything, worked out. But when I heard that, like I immediately like lit up, and I just thought, I bet John is just such a beautiful person, and he was a great dad when he had the time, because, I'm a musician too, and, you know, being a musician, being a creative person doesn't always allow all of the time that you want to have with your kids. So, as much as, everybody says even that I'm a good mom, I know I'm a good mom, but, I'm also invested in the entertainment industry, and, sometimes that means getting a babysitter for your child and not always being there when you want to be. But, when that's your livelihood, and when, you're sending money home to your family, that's the choice, and I have to be honest, music was my livelihood and still is, in a sense, my livelihood. So sometimes I'm not able to be there all the time. Hearing that story just made me think he must have an incredibly big heart, and he must be really great with kids. And, we'll get into it later, but he's estranged with his daughter at this moment. And I'm hoping, that his statement that he put out, will be read by her, and that eventually they can regain a relationship again, because nobody deserves to lose their family because they made a mistake. But especially when you personally, if you made a mistake and you didn't personally hurt somebody and you didn't personally cause death and destruction or any kind of issues, you should be forgiven and you should be heard, and your family shouldn't abandon you, and your friends and your bandmates shouldn't abandon you. I think that's an important thing to just get out there. The next person that spoke was David Newman Stump, who is John's album illustrator. And he's an accomplished album illustrator. It seems like he works with other bands as well. He basically talked about his 17-year friendship with John. And he mentioned that John initially visited the studio and fell in love with his studio and fell in love with his artwork. They quickly formed a professional relationship that evolved into a close friendship. David spoke about John's unwavering loyalty, and he also mentioned that John introduced him to numerous musicians, many of them who still remain in contact with him today. And many of these people he still creates artwork for, so that's pretty incredible. That was like a whole show, basically. There were a bunch of, supporters speaking for him. And that was really wonderful. Then, following each testimony, John's attorney requested that the judge recognize the individuals who attended the court hearing but did not testify that day. There were approximately 11 to 12 people in attendance, and 4 of those people did speak. I was one of the people in attendance, and my friend David Myers, he was also in attendance. And some of the other people I didn't know or recognize. I can't thank them enough for their support. I'm so glad that they came out to John's court hearing, and it means a lot. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this woman's name, so I think I might just let you read. During this time, the prosecutor, her name's I'll try. Catherine, starts with an R. Rockasy, maybe we'll say. I don't know. I'm just gonna say Catherine, the prosecutor, who seemed like a lovely woman. She discussed John's passion for history. She described John's actions on, I don't want to get struck on Facebook or YouTube or anything. So I'm just going to say that day, we know what day it was. She described his actions on that day as both risky and brave. They stated that she stated that he fully accepted responsibility for what he did. She noted that he turned himself in immediately and he never denied his actions. She addressed a photo, and I'm sure everybody knows the photo, where John was standing and pointing angrily at, I guess it was law enforcement. I'm not sure. I'm just speculating. This is just speculation. But he was pointing angrily in the photo. She emphasized that he was in the Capitol for only 10 minutes, though. She made sure to also mention that he did have the bear spray with him, but he never did deploy that spray, so he never did anything with it. Unfortunately, he had it, but didn't do anything with it. She also mentioned that while he yelled at the police, she clarified that he didn't harm any police. And she also pointed out, this is very important. This is a very important thing, and you need to remember this. Okay? She mentioned that he was not associated with the Oath Keepers, contrary to the media reports. Yeah. She mentioned that he was not a part of any group chats or phone calls related to the planning for that day, and that he did not possess any extensive coverage about any Oath Keepers. So, a bunch of you, I don't know about, well, I'm not accusing the fans, but a bunch of the people out there that were naysayers, becoming anti-fans, all said that John was this big rat. And listen, if you don't want to hear my opinion, or if you do, you could click on the link and read the article. you could just not listen to my opinion or my live stream about this, Like, you don't need to listen to me. I don't want to be obnoxious to you. But I really think that this is important, and this is, like I said, this is my account of the events of the court date, and like I said, when these transcripts come out, John is going to be vindicated. It's so important to remember that John is not a rat. He never was. I noticed that even with the coverage now, they keep saying former oath keeper, former oath keeper. Listen, guys, he probably donated to the oath keepers a little bit. He liked the idea, which would the lawyer discussed. He liked the idea of the oath keepers. He didn't know Stuart Rhodes. He didn't know a lot of people in that organization. He donated. He got a damn hat. He wore that hat that day. It was the hat that probably like ruined his life, unfortunately. I don't think his life is over though. Let's say that much. It ruined his life temporarily. Okay? John is getting his life back. He's going to have a really good life. I know it. And he's gained fans throughout this process. And so what? He lost some people. You know what? Good riddance. They're all a bunch of fucking assholes if if you ask me. So sorry, I didn't mean to swear, but if you didn't believe in John and you didn't want to do the research about it and you just wanted to read a sensationalized article, you don't belong in his life and you don't belong as a fan of Iced Earth, okay? I'm just going to leave it there. But it's critical that the media stop associating him with a group because he's been vindicated. He had no information about them. And we'll get into a lot of this when I read the rest of this statement. But, do you guys remember Dee Snider making like those derogatory remarks about John, labeling him as a snitch? That was like particularly misleading. I think that didn't help. I think that Dee Snider should have looked at the facts. I can imagine Dee Snider was emotional because he's super liberal, and that's fine. Look, I always liked Twisted Sister. I always liked Dee Snider, but he is 100% wrong. He was always 100% wrong about John Schaffer. He did not wait until the facts came out. He just wanted to give a damn opinion and have a bunch of people comment on his stupid Twitter account, and he didn't lose all respect for me because I don't think I'm ever gonna hate Twisted Sister's music. I don't think I'm ever gonna hate Dee Snider 100% because this is just the nature of the beast. That's who he is. He's a very opinionated guy. But I think he was wrong to do that. I really, really, really don't like that he did that. I'll put it that way. I commented on his Twitter, and I don't really care. I wasn't mean to him. I just offered a different opinion, which is basically the opinion I'm giving you now. Get the facts straight. Read the court documents. Then, you know what? If you don't like what you read, then bitch about it. How about that? After all of that, after the prosecutor spoke, John's attorney, Mark Victor, presented John to address the court, and his statement to the judge is virtually identical to the one posted on his lawyer's website, except he stated his willingness to accept whatever sentence that the judge deemed appropriate. So John said, "To my family, friends, and fans worldwide, I profoundly regret my actions on that day." I can't say that day, okay? "I haven't been a perfect man, but for a majority of my life, I've been a very productive man and have tried to live my life with integrity and a disciplined work ethic," which is true. Which is absolutely fucking true. All right. If you look into everything, if you've even read John Schaffer's biography on his website, you know that he has a very, very disciplined work ethic. And you know that he is an extremely good person. That he never would like just lay down and die, you know? He he I think I read that he was 16 years old when he moved out of his parents' house. He slept in a car. He slept in, like, empty houses and stuff like that until he was able to, like, get a place, and then he became a hot tar roofer from what I remember. That's a hardworking guy, right? I'm sorry, like, the guy that does roofs for a living? John, give me a call. I needed some roof help in the past, that's all I'm saying. Um, sorry. But that's a hardworking guy. And let me get back to the statement. I apologize. Again, if you don't want my commentary, you could go read my article. But the thing is, I wanted to put out this video because I didn't want to like put out a stuffy manifesto that people are going to be bored reading. I want you to at least see my personality and, see where I'm coming from with this article. All right. So, anyway, let me get back. I deeply love our country and the founding principles that have inspired people from all around the world to look at the USA as a beacon of hope for all humanity. Having traveled the world for over 30 years and having performed in approximately 100 countries, it was always a great feeling and relief when the airplane would safely land home on US soil. And you know that John, like if you're a fan of Iced Earth, you know that John was always like really into the United States. He always loved our country. Look at his damn tattoos. Look at his tattoos. There's like a there's a bunch of pictures. Just Google John Schaffer tattoos. You could look at all of his tattoos right online, you know? Oh, look at it's Metal John. And it's Iced Earth's Geeks vlog. I love that. He mentioned that his late mom was a huge Iced Earth fan, and that's a beautiful thing. And My dad my dad was a big fan of Ripper Owens, and I remember when Ripper had, been I don't know how do you say it? Replaced or replaced? I get because well, I mean, I don't know. Rob Halford came back to the band, okay, we'll put it that way. Rob Halford came back to the band, but I remember my dad saying to me when Rob Halford came back to the band, he goes, "Yeah, but that guy Tim, he sounded real great with Judas Priest, and now he's in this other band." And at the time, it must have been Iced Earth because he was bragging about it. So I think my dad must have liked some Iced Earth material anyway. So all right, so anyway, let's continue. When the global pandemic came upon us and chaos ensued all around the US in 2020, I was very concerned about what seemed to be a collapse of our country and the rule of law. When the 2020 election took place, I saw many public officials and media outlets reporting that the election was stolen. Mike, when that happened, he basically said his concern deepened. A lot of our concern, deepened when people were saying that. I mean, not for nothing, but my dad got a ballot in the mail, and my dad died in 2008. We didn't mail it back in, of course, but it's just, I don't know. There was a lot of weird stuff happening, and I think like the change in the rules in the election, sort of took a toll on everybody from both sides. Both sides were really freaked out. One side hated Trump, the other side loved Trump, and there was a whole summer of bullshit that went on. Um, there was just so much going on. All right, guys. I don't think either side were acting, like they normally should. This led to my decision to go to DC and have my voice heard. I'm not excusing my impulsive behavior. I was wrong, and I take ownership of my actions. I own the fact that I made a huge mistake, and I wish I never would have gone there. In fact, the consequences have been devastating on my life, family, friends, business colleagues, and business partners. And that's the truth. He had to deal with a lot of hell. And a lot of the people that were associated with John had to deal with a lot of hell. And honestly, again, I don't think that was fair. There were facts out there that people just didn't read. And that's again the whole lunacy of this whole situation when it comes to the fans and when it comes to the media. It's just like what I don't really know, especially the media. What's wrong with the media that they can't actually fully read a court document before putting out an article? That gets to me. So anyway, the rest of John's statement. I knew immediately that I had let my emotions get the best of me, and I made a terrible mistake. I drove home to Indiana the following morning on Thursday, January 7th, 2021. On the 8th, I found my attorneys, and at my request, they immediately reached out to the authorities. I willingly surrendered and cooperated with the authorities. Initially, I was charged with multiple serious felony offenses and feared I may spend the rest of my life in prison, which was a horrible thing that he even had to think that he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison for being in the Capitol for 10 minutes. Sorry, I was starting to lose my voice. I spent several months in custody following my self surrender. I was placed in solitary confinement with horrendous conditions, which was an extremely traumatic experience. I became the first person of hundreds of co defendants to enter a guilty plea and have now been sentenced to probation. It's such an important point to remember that John did turn himself in right away. And there were some sensationalized articles that were out there that actually stated that they like law enforcement, they were still looking for John after he had been released from jail on a separate, this was a separate matter. They had been trying to serve him with a lawsuit which is totally separate from the criminal situation. And they didn't, the court that was serving the lawsuit did not have the correct address information, and because of that, they put out like a stupid article, which I'll get into a little bit later. Just something that I think the media needs to walk back, now that all the facts are in. All right, so here's the rest of the statement. I'm still going. Until now, I resisted the strong urge to issue a public statement due to my ongoing cooperation and wishes and the wishes of federal authorities. Okay, so that's important to note too. Like everyone was all upset. They were like, "Where's John? Where's John? Why isn't he talking to us? Why isn't he saying anything?" It's because he couldn't, guys. He couldn't. The government didn't want him to. And if we had any hope of getting John Schaffer back, we needed to wait. Okay. This extended period of silence has added additional challenges to my life as a public person. Since the beginning, I wanted to express my remorse for my actions and address the legitimate concern of my fans worldwide. I watched as one media outlet after another dragged my reputation through the mud and condemned me for not making a statement. See, I was just saying that. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous to expect him to make a statement. We all knew he couldn't make a statement. I mean, anybody that was involved that day, they weren't even allowed to have social media anymore, It was lucky that other people were managing the Iced Earth band page. Otherwise, that page would be completely deleted. We wouldn't even have that page. However, I tried to be as productive as possible in lieu of my very damaged reputation and career. The whole situation has been extremely difficult. However, I know that I have become a better man because of it. I used to stay so busy that I didn't have much time for self-reflection. In the last 3.5 years, that's mostly what I've done. I've become a member of a wonderful church and I improved myself spiritually, mentally, and physically. This personal revival has inspired me to continue writing and recording. I am certain that there will be a very positive outlook in my future artistic creations. To my fans who have continued to support me throughout this deeply embarrassing ordeal, I want to apologize for letting you down and thank you for keeping me going. To those fans who I have lost due to my decisions that day, I certainly understand. I humbly ask everybody to allow me to demonstrate through my actions how far I've come. I wish to use my music use my art to unite people and never to divide. Sincerely, John Schaffer. And in my opinion, that has always been the consistent message of John Schaffer and his music, was to always unite people, unite this country, not divide people. He's always tried to educate people. There's more to it than just him trying to educate people with his music and put his art out there, like, the way he did. There's a lot more to it. He's not only touched on, things about the United States, but he's touched on many pieces of history, and he's also touched on interpersonal relationships, which is extremely important. People need music that focus on those things, like he kind of, I sometimes I compare him, but I know that they're different. And I'm sure John would want me to decipher the differences. But he reminds me a lot of Dave Mustaine. And Dave Mustaine has always stood by his convictions, but he's also always been very like emotional and about like, history and interpersonal relationships. And that's why I like both bands. That's why I like Iced Earth. That's why I like Megadeth, I just wanted to get that out there. I feel like they're similar human beings, wonderful human beings. Now, let's move forward and let's talk more about what happened at court, okay? John's attorney, Mark Victor, then spoke to Judge Mehta. He expressed that he wished that Judge Mehta could have more time to get to know John, stating that John is a very special and unique individual. And I fully agree with that. I mean, come on. Just look at what the music has done for all of us, okay? Mr. Victor expressed gratitude for the opportunity to know John and to be his friend. Mr. Victor emphasized John's remorse for his actions and highlighted how much John cooperated from the outset. He mentioned John's belief that the election was stolen and fraudulent, which made him feel like our country was under attack. Attorney Victor also stated that he believes that John was intentionally misled by certain individuals, and I'm sure I can see that. Like he's a famous person. He's a passionate person. He's passionate about our country, and people certainly could take advantage of it. I've seen multiple people get, their goodwill taken advantage of. Why wouldn't they take advantage of somebody like John? I agree with Attorney Victor. He also sort of mentioned that he felt that John was particularly misled by the executive branch of the United States, which I've always said. I always said that. I always said, you know what? Like, certain people in the executive branch should be blamed for this day. You're going to tell me that a bunch of officials are going to say what they were saying back then and, tell people to rally and tell people to get together, and then why were they surprised? People from the executive branch were literally trying to have people rally and come out and be there. It's kind of scary that the executive branch set a bunch of people up, in my opinion. But again, this is just my opinion, and opinions aren't defamation, and facts aren't defamation. Okay, it's really important to get that out there. He pointed out that John was interested in the Keepers because he valued honesty in keeping an oath. Very consistent with John Schaffer and everything that we know about him. John had owned an Oath Keeper's hat. I'm not sure how he owned one, but I'm assuming it's probably from like giving a donation, you know, listening to some of the stuff. Like it has to be from like a donation or like, something like that. Have you ever have you ever given a donation and it says you're like a lifetime member or something because you gave a donation? I donated to the Trump campaign. I was a lifetime member, for God's sake. So I mean, it's very easy to get a piece of merchandise from somebody, people. Just think about it this way. I got John Schaefer's jackets. I got 2 of them. Does that mean that like I'm John Schaefer? Like I don't know. You know what I'm saying? He also, okay, so he noted that he did not participate or make any plans to attack the Capitol, dudes. All right? He was not involved in any group texts. He wasn't involved with any phone calls. This is consistent, again, with the findings of the court. And this is, again, the most important part of this live stream. And the most important piece of this article. Although John had bear spray with him that day, Attorney Victor reminded the judge that he never used it. Mr. Victor stated that he brought the bear spray because he heard that members of other violent groups might attack him. Mr. Victor described John as being shoved around and being protective of the safety of others. He reiterated that John was deeply misled that day and that John recognized this himself, which is consistent with the fact that John turned himself in right away and he felt remorse immediately after being there. Mr. Victor stated that John's time in custody was extremely traumatic due to the solitary confinement and degrading treatment. So you guys probably read some of the articles. The prisoners were throwing feces at him. They were threatening his life, which is why he ended up in solitary, because it was too dangerous for him to even be among the population. They were so threatening toward him. We'll get into that about it like another time, though. But it was a really bad experience for him. He also mentioned, this is really important, that a glitch in the court system resulted in a leak of the confidential plea agreement discussions between the prosecution and the defense. This leak led to John being transferred from one jail to another in the middle of the night for his safety. Now, items in that plea agreement that were leaked were pretty damaging to John, because that's where everybody started getting the idea that John was a rat, because the government wanted John to give information about certain people that he didn't have the information for. He didn't have the information. There were no text messages in his phone. There were no text messages in other people's phones. There were no group calls in other people's phones or any type of calls between any of these people. John is not on their record. John is there. They are not, and those people are not on John's record. They look through everything. The government is very thorough. They can comb through all your stuff and find out. He wasn't able to be fruitful to the investigation because he didn't know anybody. That has to be the takeaway. He didn't know anybody. He wasn't involved with those people. He just went there because he's a passionate historian. Let's just face it. All of us should know that. I always had faith. I always had faith in John. I knew all of this crap in the media didn't sound right. Mr. Victor addressed the lawsuit filed against John and several others by General Carl Racine on behalf of the District of Columbia. So that's a separate issue from the criminal issue that we'll be tracking here, at least on my channel and on my social media platforms. He highlighted that John's address was leaked during the lawsuit documents that were made public. So when the lawsuit documents were leaked, his address was made public. And honestly, I'm praying that John is going to be able to be vindicated in this lawsuit, because he was vindicated in this criminal case. He did not cause any destruction. He did not cause any harm to any individuals. He was not a part of the planning. So it probably will hold up. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to say that that's my opinion. I think things are going to be okay. Mr. Victor noted that he was extremely offended that John was labeled a racist, especially considering that John had performed in hundreds of countries, over 100 countries, not hundreds, over 100 countries. This accusation, along with misleading media articles, resulted in John's leaked negotiations, which created a deep misconception among the public. Many believe that John had somehow been involved in snitching on others, despite the fact that he did not personally know anybody associated with the Oath Keepers or associated with the planning that day. As a result, John's career was canceled. And we all know that. We watched it. On top of that, his credit cards were revoked. His credit cards were revoked, people. So they're trying to cut off his way to live. Okay? Oh, John Baylor he's in the chat. He said he wish he got to meet John Schaffer. Maybe you will get to meet him one day, John. You're such a sweetie. Anyway, so they tried to cut off his livelihood, his finances, so he couldn't live. And as I stated before, he chose to remain silent to comply with the government's wishes. However, his 3.5 year silence led to backlash and a strained relationship with his daughter, which I mentioned earlier. And I just pray that he and his daughter are able to get their relationship back. And, let's just hope everything works out for the best for he and his family. Mr. Victor described John as a good man and a patriot. He mentioned John's band. One of his bands was called Sons of Liberty, which he said should demonstrate the fact that John has a deep love for the United States of America. Additionally, he shared that John had been writing poetry and music since he was in 9th grade, which we all know that. Mr. Victor emphasized that John always had been a dedicated and generous citizen, having worked hard throughout his life, and he pointed out that John transitioned from making hit records to working full-time during this period. So John is working a regular job. God bless him. It must be hard to go from being a rock star on his level to working a regular job, but he's a real man, so he's doing what he's got to do. John is very patriotic, and he even has a tattoo of Benjamin Franklin. Like I was saying, yeah, look at this man's tattoos. He's got a bunch of really cool tattoos of political figures that that founded this country. And that's a pretty incredible thing, A lot of people get tattoos of a bunch of nonsense, So it's important to note that, that's all. John loves our country. Mr. Victor also highlighted John's success on probation over the last 3 years, arguing that the 3 months that John spent in solitary confinement, followed by 3 years of probation, should be considered sufficient punishment. And I agree. Mark highlighted that John's recent health struggles and his lack of prior convictions, he recommended a reduced fine of $200 instead of $2,000. He argued that a lower fine would alleviate the substantial financial burden imposed by this incident, especially considering the pending civil lawsuit filed by the District of Columbia. Mark noted that John was only in the Capitol for 10 minutes, during which he caused no damage and did not engage in any violent behavior. He expressed gratitude for the judge's consideration in his requests. So, finally, Judge Mehta actually came out and he expressed his thoughts on John's case and his sentencing. He conveyed regret regarding John's estrangement with his daughter and his health issues. The judge acknowledged that John's childhood was traumatic, as well as his life and he also acknowledged his life and his career, okay? He referenced an unflattering video of John in November 2020 where he emphasized that John was not involved in the Oath Keepers' chats or phone calls. The judge noted that John admitted to attempting to obstruct an election as part of his plea deal. Having presided over numerous cases, Judge Mehta pointed out John's cooperation. However, he felt it did not have the impact he had hoped for. This is where I got a stomach ache when I was in court. I was like, what in the hell is this going to mean? So, initially, he viewed John as a symbol of the events of that day and had hoped that he would provide more information regarding the Oath Keepers. Unfortunately, evidence showed that John did not possess the desired information. Evidence showed this, okay? Again, something you need to remember. While acknowledging that John was not responsible for the injuries suffered by law enforcement during the events, the judge stressed the importance of not minimizing what happened that day. He recognized John's character, noting that he accepted responsibility right away. The judge understood that John truly believed the situation was a false flag, but he stated that this belief was unfounded. He clarified multiple times that John did not engage in any violence or destruction on that day. Judge Mehta also mentioned that he had the opportunity to listen to some of John's music. He remarked that the music was not, quote, his cup of tea, prompting laughter from, from the courtroom. But then he added that was the beauty of music, and that music was universal. He expressed admiration for John and acknowledged the impact his music had around the world. The judge emphasized that people make mistakes and that John should be forgiven. So the judge is saying this, okay? He affirmed that John possesses the gift of art, music, and poetry, telling him that he deserves forgiveness and expressing hope that John could regain his career. Okay, so that was a whole thing. So that's a really great thing that Judge Mehta actually believes that John should get his career back and that he should be forgiven. I mean, that's a pretty good thing. I hope that that helps people, sort of see John for who he really is. And I hope that it helps people see that he should get his career back, because I think he should. I don't think he should lose everything just because he made a mistake. In conclusion, Judge Mehta imposed a sentence of 36 months probation, 120 hours of community service, and restitution fine of $1,200, with no objections from the prosecutor or counsel. He expressed his hope that John could now close this chapter in his life and move forward in a positive direction as he deserves to. That's everything I witnessed that day. So, my personal takeaway from this is that John took responsibility for his actions, and he has a profound love for our country. It's important to note that John was not an actual lifetime member of Oath Keepers. So, there was no information to provide to the United States government. He was not involved in the planning of that day, as he had no part in any group chats or phone calls. We keep reiterating that, but remember that. No phone calls, no group chats, nothing. Not even individual text messages, nothing. John had nothing to do with the planning of that day. A lot of people I know showed up that day. Some people went in and some people didn't go in. The people who didn't go in didn't get in any trouble. The people who did go in, a lot of them took selfies and acted silly. Some of them did do some fucked up things too. I'm not going to lie and say they didn't, but John was not one of those people, okay? John was one of the people that just went there because he loves our country, okay? The evidence is extremely clear to me. Once those transcripts are publicly released, John will be vindicated. I am getting them. I already paid for them. Feel free to send me any donations that you want because it was $277, and then just think about this. We paid $500 just for the Airbnb, just to stay in DC. We paid for the tolls and the travel, and we paid for our food out there. I mean, the trip probably cost us about $1,000. So any donations for this work, you're more than welcome to. No obligation if you can't. It's okay. This has been a thing. I've been working on this for 3.5 years, guys, and I'm going to keep going with this. I'm going to highlight everything I can about the lawsuit when we have all the information. I am going to do a reading of the lawsuit when I can. And as soon as I get, but first I'm going to do the reading of the criminal court transcripts because it's very important. I believe a lot of these articles need correction, particularly the ones claiming that law enforcement was searching for John. In reality, it was a process server who mistakenly obtained the wrong address for him. Furthermore, Blabbermouth and Metal Sucks published sensational articles that incited outrage among former fans and trolls. And you know that. We watched that All of us Iced Earth fans saw it. Bunch of assholes. I plan to write an article um myself that actually puts out a clear timeline of all the events that transpired during this process. The media failed to consider how their reports damaged John's relationships with his family, friends, bandmates, and especially his daughter, because they couldn't simply read court documents correctly. Any kid would be embarrassed if they read those articles. And it's really sad because John is not what he's not who they said he was. He's not who they say he is. Even now, a lot of the articles are not fair. It's also important to clarify that he did not snitch on anyone and he had no information to provide. This is evident from the fact that he did not testify at either trial or at either a trial or a grand jury. I'm very tired, so I'm sorry I've stuttered over this report. But I felt like it was important to get out there. I wanted to get it out there this weekend, but I couldn't. It was just too much. I barely got any sleep. And I don't know. Like I think once the gavel went down, my body just shut down because I've been dealing with this for 3.5 years and combating all of the misinformation and the nonsense that I saw the ex fans pulling. I just it's just disgusting, and I have to get in touch with whoever runs Iced Earth social media and get some of those people blocked or get some of those comments deleted because there are a lot of idiots out there that don't have the facts in front of them. I'll be posting this though, and I'll be trying to get this article and get this live stream out to as many people as I can because John deserves to be vindicated. Okay? The narrative suggesting that he was hiding and avoiding law is completely unfounded, guys. John turned himself within 11 days after the assistance of his attorney. Okay, he needed assistance. I mean, you're not going to just turn yourself in when you don't have an attorney and when the attorney's not giving you the direction. So what? 11 days? So what? He needed to talk to his lawyers. He needed to tie up loose ends, and then he went in. That's what I'm assuming. And then he turned himself in, didn't abscond from justice, didn't try to skip the country, didn't try to do anything because he, honestly turned himself in. It's so obnoxious. The media narrative was so obnoxious. Additionally, the recommendation of 6 months of home confinement during the sentencing was a mistake made by the prosecution. So like they didn't even, that wasn't even something that was on the table. In court, it was actually acknowledged that the recommendation originated from a prior following that was not intended to be pursued. And just so you know, all of these facts could be verified by reviewing court documents. It is essential. Thank you again to all the people who had the benefit of the doubt for John. I was going to keep reading, but I really thank the people who stuck by him because you are special people. You guys are extremely good people. You guys really care, that's really important. I'm sure he loves you for it. I love you for it. Your undying support really, even of me in general, like it just means a lot. And the undying support for John, I bet it makes him emotional. I bet he really, really cares and he really values all of it. When I went to hand him all of the letters that you guys wrote for him, the look on his, like, I was like really upset that I had left early for DC, or not left late for DC, not earlier on the Wednesday before his court date because it was on a Friday. I kind of wanted to get out earlier, but I wanted to get those letters printed out for John. And I'm telling you, the look on his, ready to cry, the look on his face about all the letters that you guys had submitted. I literally had a book of letters. It was like a book. It was like a really thick, it was almost as thick as the book that he put out, The Wicked Words and Epic Tales, man. The look on his face was priceless. He loves you guys. He had no idea. He had no idea all these years that people still loved him. So I'm sorry. Like I really feel like this man was put through absolute hell, and it just makes me it just breaks my heart. It's made me cry several times throughout the whole process just thinking about him being alone in jail, and just about the fact that he was barely in the Capitol that day, and the fact that, they were probably, I don't know, in my opinion, using him as an example because he was a, public figure, and it just broke my heart, and I went through it, guys. I went through it, and I don't know why. Maybe it was because I was supposed to do this type of reporting. Maybe it was because I was supposed to be there, but for him, I needed to help rally the masses. I don't know, but it really it took its toll on me. I apologize. I didn't mean to start crying. But I think it's essential for everybody to recognize media narratives often represent the author's opinion. I know that this is my opinion, but sometimes, opinions can be misleading, and I need a tissue. Because this whole situation just it really made me very emotional throughout the last 3.5 years, and the bullying was really tough. Sorry guys. So a lot of times, like, these opinions, like, it just leads to the omission of crucial facts, and that that just that just couldn't have happened more for John. They just kept conveniently omitting things that were just so important to know. His fans deserve to know that stuff right away. So I encourage readers to engage in thorough research and form your own. I really encourage you to form your own opinions, regardless of the issue at hand. Okay. My long-standing support for John stems from my understanding of verifiable facts surrounding his case, which I obtained by thoroughly reviewing publicly available court documents and attending his sentencing hearing. I recommend that others take a similar approach, conducting their own research to gain a comprehensive understanding. Furthermore, I firmly believe that individuals should not be judged in the court of public opinion without access to all of the pertinent facts. John Schaffer was subjected to unwarranted criticism and scrutiny, and from social media and former fans who failed to grasp the facts, instead blindly following a misleading media narrative and engaging in harassment, judgment, and ridicule. This behavior had also targeted individuals like myself who attempted to critically evaluate the court documents only to face online bullying. However, their opinions never held any water. It never held any significance for me, as I was aware of the truth. I hope that the article that I wrote and this live stream will inspire others to stand by their convictions and support those who they believe in, because in all honesty, guys, this was really hard. Especially with people really not wanting to have open discussions and just wanting to accept an article instead of actual court documents. So I love you guys. John is commenting again. And thank you, John, for being here again. Like, I think you've been here this whole entire live stream, and it means a lot to me. It says, Iced Earth got me through deaths in the family and my widowmaker stroke that I had in 2004 at age 25. Now, listen, I'm going to put you on hold for like 2 seconds, and I'm going to discuss something a little bit further with you. And I'm sure that my friends, the friends that I've met through the Iced Earth community, will appreciate this. Listen, I don't even know if John realizes this, but I've been approached by so many people who have disabilities, including John, who dealt with the stroke. I've spoken to blind people, I've spoken to autistic people, I've spoken to people who can't walk. I've spoken to all kinds of people, and they have told me how much John has helped them through their disabilities. And I don't know how much John knows this or not, but that alone really means a lot to me personally because, I'm a little bit on the spectrum too. I really, really value people who care about those who have disabilities and who help those who have disabilities. And I heard that one of his blind fans had some questions about, back in the early 2000s about the medium changing from like CDs to like a digital platform. And John took the time to explain to this blind person how the new medium was going to work. And what a beautiful human being that is to take the time to speak to somebody with a disability so they can understand the new outlets and the new media mediums, I guess you could call it. But he's thanked countless fans in his albums. The guy really seems to give back to the fans and the community. From everything I understand, John is a very good person and a beautiful person, and he's done all he can to help people. And I really just hope that people take that into consideration. And I really, really hope that I'm sorry for crying. Like my nose is all red now from crying, but I hope that you guys see things for what they really are and do your research. And I really hope that John is able to come back with a really awesome career. I love you guys. I think that concludes this live stream. It's been like an hour, almost an hour and a half. I hope it wasn't too boring for you. I think it was really important to get a lot of these talking points out. I think it was really important to get this stuff out as soon as possible. And as soon as I get the court transcripts, I'll be sharing them. Love you guys. Remember, try to support facts. Always do your research. And good night, guys.